So next slide. First, I want to thank everyone for joining tonight, but I also want to acknowledge the elected officials that are on tonight. And I believe we have District 6 City Councilor Ben Wember on, so I acknowledge him. As we go through today, I want to go to the community guidelines to go over how we're going to operate in this space. For all participants, we want to maintain respect and be mindful of each other's space. Use I statements as we're speaking. Unless you're representing a neighborhood group or association, please state that. It helps with our feedback loop. If you are a direct abutter, we want to make sure to prioritize your concerns and prioritize the comments because we know that the direct impacts on abutters is unique. And lastly, but most importantly, we have a limit of commenting questions during our Q&A portion to 2 minutes each person. There will be a timer, so you should be aware of when your 2 minutes are wrapping up. And for us to know in the team, we will like to collect your feedback. So if we do not get to your questions, we are here to follow up and answer them. Please email whitestadium@boston.gov if we do not get to your question tonight. We also want to be mindful of 8 p.m. wrap-up time. So thank you all for joining again. And I see people trickling in. Next slide. So going over the agenda tonight, and then we'll go over the key presenters. So today, as I mentioned, we are here to go over specifically the transportation updates. We'll have a brief grounding to start off of the project and where we're at. And then we'll go into transportation updates. We'll specifically talk about 4 themes: traffic and parking for BPS events and soccer league game day events. Safety and enforcement is another category, communication and feedback, and lastly, formalized commitments of the TAPA process and the TAPA agreement, which is the transportation agreement. And then we'll go into Q&A while we're here to answer questions and hear concerns and get feedback. Some of the key presenters that are here tonight is myself, Brianna Malloy, Chief of Community Engagement. We have Nick Gove, who is our Transportation Commissioner. Then we have Avery Esdale, who is our BPS Athletics Executive Director, who represents BPS. Then we have our Boston Unity soccer partners that are here to present as well. We have Mike, who is the Community Engagement Director, and then Brian, who also represents the Boston Unity soccer team that will be here to present and also answer questions. Okay, so we're here to just ground ourselves in the vision and the why we are here. We are here to build a state-of-the-art BPS athletic hub that our students and our residents can be very proud of and can call home. It is an opportunity to invest into our young people and to invest into our communities. So how did we get here? And how did we really create this vision? This vision stemmed from a lot of engagement and visiting sessions from our students, our coaches, our key administrators, our community at large, and also it really connected with our frequent park users as well as our youth leaders. One of the key benefits that we envision as this partnership is a deep investment to new funding opportunities. And what that looks like is capital investment for professional and a state-of-the-art ADA compliant indoor and outdoor amenities and facilities. What that looks like in actuality is things like a world-class 8-lane track and field. It also looks like a new basketball court and a tennis court. It looks like study rooms and administrative offices for BPS. And it also looks like community rooms where we can have neighborhood meetings and other activation. What this also looks like when it comes to funding support is professional maintenance committed by the partners, and also an opportunity to invest monetarily into the Franklin Park Action Plan that we know the Franklin Park Coalition and other community members invested so much time and effort into. Next slide. Some additional community benefits that is noteworthy is that this opportunity and transformation into White Stadium will build out intentional expanded public access We know that right now, White Stadium is basically not used and underutilized. When we invest into this partnership, it looks like 15-hour daily operation and also operations on the weekends. The reason why this is important is when we talk about Boston Public Schools and other community organizers utilizing this space, it means world-class audio opportunities, lighting to just bring their events to the next level. We also, additional other benefits are job careers and mentorship opportunity. We know that this opportunity is going to bring in jobs as well as contractual opportunities so we can invest the monetarily back into our communities. Another commitment is the annual $500,000 community benefit fund that is going to go directly back into local businesses, go directly to BPS students, and to the health and wellness of the Black and Browns communities that abut Franklin Park, and also directly into Franklin Park as well. One of the other community benefits is an opportunity to have a White Stadium Neighborhood Advisory Council, which will act as a platform, an opportunity for engagement to hear feedback and also oversight. Lastly, we know that we have to build a state-of-the-art carbon neutral stadium, and it's also going to be designed and operated to reduce light and enhance safety in a way that feels respectful of the community. Next slide. So how do we achieve this vision? BPS, Boston Public Schools, will grant the Boston Unity Sports Partnership lease and licensing rights to the stadium for up to 2 game days per year, including championship games, with strict restrictions to play in place to ensure that the Boston Public Schools and public access is guaranteed once the stadium is complete. As we look at this diagram and picture, the black line is BPS property. The red area is the leased area and is licensed up to 20 games a year to the sports league. What is important to keep in mind and what's very unique about this opportunity is that this ownership remains with the city. Next slide. So just to recap the engagement that has happened thus far, engagement happened early spring of 2023. And there has been hundreds and hundreds of meetings that I'm sure a lot of folks on this call have participated in, but a lot of other community opportunities have happened. Whether that means one-on-one engagement, small groups, or huge meetings like this, or submitting your questions via email, or having public comment opportunities, or if an IAG member represented your concerns or gave feedback about the project. We've had a lot of intentional engagement to make sure the voice of community members and abutters were centered in this conversation. There's been opportunities in commission approvals from the Zoning Commission to the Boston School Committee. So I want to bring your attention to this diagram, but I also want to make sure to underscore updates on milestones and next steps that you can expect to hear from the city, because this is not the only opportunity that we will have on continuous engagement. So some of the next steps are finalizing the legal agreement, which is the lease agreement, which will legalize a lot of the agreement between the city and the soccer team. The tree meeting, which will go over a lot of the construction plan and the tree mitigation efforts. Demolition is expected as well. At some point, we want to make sure that the community is aware and in the loop on that, which is why we're giving a heads up tonight. We also want to give milestone updates on the community meetings on implementation. So how do we make sure that contractors are involved and community members and local businesses are involved in the contractual pieces of the building out of the stadium? Also thinking through, as I mentioned earlier, the White Stadium Neighborhood Advisory Council and that formation. We'll also be kicking off various Franklin Park capital improvement initiatives that everyone is involved in. And then last but not least, hiring a dedicated Franklin Park executive director to manage the area. So with that, I'm gonna pass it over to Mike from the soccer team.
Thanks, Chief Malore. And good evening, everyone. My name is Michael Ominazu, and I serve as the soccer team's Director of Community Engagement. Quick note, tonight in many ways serves as a full circle moment as I've previously participated in this project as a community member, joining community meetings as I'm a Roxbury resident, and specifically in the Garrison Trotter neighborhood on the north side of the stadium and north of Seaver Street. And also my role in itself exists as a manifestation of and direct response to the passionate advocacy for prioritizing community voice and the lived experiences of those closely impacted by this partnership. And that's really the key theme for tonight. So in that same spirit, we're going to really focus on going beyond hearing from the community and more intentionally listening. And our time together tonight will focus on sharing how our work with the city engagement team, as you heard Chief Malore review through that continuum, how we've worked to build meaningful connections with all of you, and specifically want to spend time tonight identifying community concerns with the specific purpose of creating the corresponding solutions. So as you heard earlier, or next, this slide summarized the 4 key areas of transportation planning as determined by you all. So really focusing on traffic and parking for NWSL and BPS events, safety enforcement, communications and feedback, as well as formalizing commitments and through that TAPA process. Also, we'll focus on the bolded areas that you see here, addressing the 4 key concerns raised. As you can see, our transportation plan is multimodal, and that's a critical part of this as there's no spectator parking to be allowed on the site. This decision is designed to protect the park and to minimize traffic congestion, which we've heard is like a really major priority from you all, and it's to encourage sustainable transportation options. Also, we're excited to share key updates as a lot of you have asked about them, specifically on the introduction of free shuttle services from MBTA stations, enhancements to bike and pedestrian infrastructure, improved parking management to reduce the impact on nearby neighborhoods. That's particularly personally of interest to me among a number of the benefits we'll review. Our plan prioritizes public transit, biking, and walking to the stadium, along with aligning with our sustainability and community goals. And so now I'd like to hand it over to Brian Maisel, a principal at Howard Stein Hudson and our transportation consultant with the soccer team. He'll walk you through the details of our game day transportation and how we'll get spectators to the stadium without allowing any on-site parking for visitors. Brian?
Hi there, everyone. Good evening. Good to see everyone again. So really we're going to focus on some of the BUSP game day transportation updates that have happened since the last time we've been in front of you. Working with the city, we've made a lot of improvements on setting up the structure of the TAPA. But right now what we're going to talk about is we've also had a lot of discussions with the MBTA and exactly how and where we're going to run the shuttles from. So just starting quickly with the numbers we have on the North Loop, which comes in off of Walnut Avenue. There'll be one connection to, at this point, Ruggles Station, which you can see in the top of the image on the right. And there will be 22 shuttles. We approximate to and from Ruggles out of the maximum 40 that we've agreed to have on Walnut Avenue. And then on the South Loop, we are going to connect to JFK UMass, and I'll get into more details on why each station was chosen. And there we'd have about 22 shuttles coming from JFK UMass out of the 104 shuttle trips. And of course, just to remind everyone, the rest of the shuttle trips are to and from our satellite parking facilities that we're going to have. But choosing these stations came through the key criteria you can see on the left. Obviously the most important is to offer a superior alternative to driving or to doing a ride sharing, right? We want to keep private vehicles out of this area and have as many people on as few buses as possible so that traffic impact is kept to a minimum. We'll get into more of this, but we've incorporated community input and also T input. Generally, we also want to make sure we're providing, this goes to point 1, but having these stations be in a location where the spectators are going to be coming from, or the spectators that will need assistance to get to the site through the taking mass transit. Make sure we're putting the stations where it serves them best, again, so that we're offering a superior alternative to driving. And then accounting for ongoing capital projects, such as future bus lanes, and improvements that are coming to MBTA stations. And of course, again, making sure that we're minimizing our impact on the traffic flow. So going way back to the first time we had met, and I had met with you back, I think it was probably the fall of 2022 or 23, excuse me. We started with maybe we'll use Stony Brook and Green Street. Those are the closest to the stadium, as you can see on this map. And we quickly heard right away from residents that no, those aren't appropriate. We don't want buses on our residential streets. So we pivoted. And at that point, we were Forest Hills and Jackson Square. And Forest Hills still remains an option that provides a lot of great bus connections that we can use, and also the commuter rail if that works out, and also the Orange Line. But instead of using Jackson Square, which again, we heard from the community, it's very congested along Center Street. Maybe there's a better alternative. And then talking with the T, they also suggested that Ruggles Station would be better for that. And we'll get into the operations of why that is on the next slide. We're still looking at Four Corners Geneva Station. And as we've always said, we would do shuttles from there if and when the T electrifies that route and has trains arriving more frequently than they currently do. So that's still on the table, but just not something we're looking at this point because we need the T to switch that line over from the Fairmont line commuter rail it is now to what we know as the Indigo line. And then last time we met, we were talking about Fields Corner. And really the T, it's closer as you can see on this map, but the T brought up a good point. One is operations, but two, there's only one branch of the Red Line going there, right? So JFK UMass Station has both of the branches going through there. So we switched to JFK UMass, and it's really, even though it's a little further, it's actually not that much longer of a trip in the shuttle from the station to the stadium. Go ahead on the next slide. So again, this is from discussions we had with the T and how it would actually operate at each one of the stations that we'd be using. So on the upper left is Ruggles Station, and we would be using the Tremont Street. And then directly adjacent to the station would be where we'd be loading and the boarding from the buses. You can see the magenta lines, that's where that operation would take place. The green lines are the actual route of the bus. In the middle here, we have Forest Hills along the Arbor Way coming in and essentially going around Forest Hills Station in a clockwise manner and then heading back to the stadium. And then the upper right is the JFK UMass Station, and coming in and basically just going around K Circle, boarding and alighting from, there is a parking aisle underneath 93 that would be able to hold the amount of passengers expected as we expect to be there. So that's where we are thinking about doing that process now. This plan is flexible. We can adapt as it goes on. One of the things that came to us from the T was that they are looking at modifying Jackson Square. And, you know, if in the future we're using Jackson Square, well, obviously we have to look at the timing, right? If they're under construction, then we can't be using Jackson Square. And again, this isn't a plan for one event or 1 year of events. This is a plan that's starting, you know, in 2026, and then will be modified every season as needed. But, you know, the T is going to be doing different things at different times. So the key part is that we have redundancy and we have flexibility to change it up as we go. So switching gears a bit here is just a detailed site plan showing how the transportation works within Franklin Park itself. I'm just going to start on the upper right along Seaver Street, where you see it says TNC, right? That is our ride hailing location where people would be getting in and out of Ubers and Lyfts. The blue bar there is also indicates that there's an existing Blue Bike station there. And then you can see the orange path is how people would get from the Humboldt turnaround area where we'd be doing the ride hailing to the stadium. And anyone that needed ADA access from this point, you can see on the lower left is a picture of an example of a golf cart with an ADA ramp to get people in there. It's not, you know, we don't know exactly what golf cart they would be using, but there are multiple ones and they are very, very, very ADA friendly. So there's a lot of options. Again, swinging down a little bit further to the south here, we now get into where our bike valet would be. This is for private bike valets, people coming on their own bikes. We're not going to put in hundreds and hundreds of bike racks all through Franklin Park, because obviously when there's an event there, that would not look very well for the rest of the park users. So what we're going to do is set up a bike corral where people would park their bikes and get a valet ticket, and we'll accommodate those and keep them secured and protected during the event. And then people come back at the end and they would get their bike back. We'd also be doing Blue Bikes Valet, This way, when a blue bike station, say if there's only 19 docks at the station, the first 19 people that come, well, the station's now full, we wouldn't be able to take anymore. The blue bike valet actually has a blue bike employee that would take the bikes out of the docks, put them in a van so that people can continuously use the docks that are in within the area, within Franklin Park. We have provided, as part of our mitigation package, the funding for an additional blue bike station, which will show you potential options on the next slide. But keep going around where the South Shuttle Loop. Oh, no, we'll get back to, sorry about that. South Shuttle Loop, on the bottom of the page here, this is where our shuttles would be coming in from Columbia Ave and down Circuit Drive. Again, the orange line indicates the ADA accessible route that we would be providing via the golf carts. And this is because, you know, a lot of the paths, due to the terrain within Franklin Park, don't meet ADA slopes. And obviously, we don't want to be going in and touching all the park. It's the natural setting the way it is. So the idea of the golf carts is to provide ADA access without really overhauling what needs to be done on those paths. We'll also be doing bike racks close to the Walnut Ave. I'm almost done, I promise. And then the existing blue bike station that's already there is up at School Street. So the bike racks, we are putting some in. We're not putting in hundreds again. We're going to do the bike valet, but there will be bike racks installed in this area so that people can use it, you know, 24/7 during all times of the park if they want to bike to get here. I'm all set now on that one. So here is a very simple graphic that is not showing up correctly, unfortunately. I'm not sure if the rendering, it's on my version. But anyway, we're like I said, we're funding a new blue bike station. And we're showing we're showing two, unfortunately, A and C. A down by the Shattuck, the picnic area, C and Peabody Circle, and then B would be by the Giraffe entrance, so the rear parking lot of Franklin, of the zoo at Placedale Road and Parent Pot Road. You know, this expands the city's goal of expanding the blue bike stations to all neighborhoods in 2025. The team, BUSP, is committed to funding one station. The city on their own, with or without this project, is looking at expanding existing docks and also installing new ones. I am going to hand it off to Avery.
Thank you, Brian. Good evening, everybody. Thanks for taking the time to join tonight. Now let's move into traffic and parking management for BPS athletic events at White Stadium. Our transportation consultants have conducted an extensive review analyzing a range of BPS events, from smaller practices to larger gatherings like graduations. One of the key findings was the informal, inconsistent parking and pathway management, which resulted in congestion and bottlenecks, especially during larger events. On the right, you'll see a breakdown of the different types of events we in BPS Athletics host. Most of our events are smaller, with around 50 attendees, but we also handle medium-sized and larger events that require more planning and resources. Next slide, please. Our goal is to introduce clear, consistent guidelines to simplify parking and traffic flow, making access easier for families, athletes, and staff while minimizing the impact on the park. On the right, you can see photos of our current site conditions, which show where these improvements will take place. Where we've worked closely with consultants to review the vehicle routes around the stadium and nearby parking lots. This slide shows the entire site plan we're using to formalize the transportation guidelines for BPS events at White Stadium. The goal is to develop a formal plan that not only improves transportation operations, but also reduces the impact on the park and surrounding neighborhoods. So, what strategies are we implementing to address these challenges? First, we're focusing on frequent BPS events. By evaluating our current transportation operations, we can ensure improvements are targeted where they're needed most. Second, we've optimized the existing pathways and access points. This includes limiting vehicle traffic during peak times, prioritizing bus drop-offs, ADA parking, and access for key personnel. Finally, as BPS Athletics continues to grow, we're preparing for future expansions by incorporating flexible solutions that work with the realities of the park. Our next step will involve aligning these strategies with ongoing stadium improvements while collaborating with park operators to ensure we streamline transportation for larger events as well. I'll now pass it over to Nick Gove, Commissioner of Boston Transportation Department.
Thanks, Avery. Good evening, everyone. So we're going to talk about operations and enforcement. We at BTD, we're creating a new White Stadium district parking program for residents who live within the Walkshed area. This Walkshed area can be seen on the right side of the slide here. Residents who are eligible based on the 3 criteria listed on the slide will be able to apply for a parking sticker, which will go on your vehicle, exempting you from enforcement on game days, similar to the resident permit parking stickers that we provide. Similarly, each household will be eligible to receive a visitor hang tag, allowing them to have guests over on game days. This hang tag can be easily displayed in your guest vehicle, which will also exempt them from enforcement. And the stickers you saw on the previous page, they may change. These are the current draft versions of those. All right, so parking enforcement on game days. For this transportation plan to be successful, it's critical that we at BTD are able to enforce the parking restrictions. We'll deploy 10 to 20 parking enforcement staff and supervisors to enforce restrictions on game days. These shifts will be paid for by Boston Unity Soccer. Traffic details will be staged within the Walkshed to help manage the flow of traffic. You can see the graphic on the right shows where the enforcement and traffic details will be assigned. Temporary signage and variable message boards will be displayed to communicate parking and traffic related restrictions. We are also increasing the fee associated with parking violations issued in the White Stadium Walkshed on game days. Folks who illegally park will be ticketed $100 and potentially towed. This is similar to a fee that we created in the Fenway district for events there, which has been successful. All right, so sorry. So there's traffic signal mitigation associated with this project. The BTD Traffic Management Center, for those who don't know, here at City Hall, monitors daily traffic throughout the city on a daily basis. They have the ability to make real-time signal adjustments at traffic signals that are connected to the system. So as part of this project, we're going to be installing overhead fiber and replacing controller units so we can implement the video monitoring system at both Forest Hill and Glen Road, and then Forest Hill up at William Street. So again, this will allow us to monitor traffic in real time and kind of proactively manage congestion and improve traffic flow, both on game days as well as during peak congestion during other times. So this is an improvement not just for game days, but kind of throughout the year. So ongoing assessment of transportation plan. This slide is an example of the traffic reduction on a residential street once restrictions have been put in place. So in this particular example, this would be restricting access to just shuttle buses and local residents, and you can clearly see the data points there. We're in the process of conducting traffic studies to collect baseline data and assess the impacts of stadium events and make adjustments to the transportation plan as needed. So protecting parking on game days. One of our key goals is to ensure that parking is protected for park users, such as zoo visitors and golfers who are not attending a game on a game day or not attending the game on game day. To achieve this, we're proposing the use of the Park Boston app, which will allow users to reserve parking spaces specifically designated for non-game day visitors. This is the same app that the city uses for our parking meters throughout the city, so folks will probably be familiar with this. This reservation system helps maintain access for regular park users and discourage soccer spectators from using these spaces. It's an easy-to-use solution. We think it will help reduce congestion and ensure that, you know, families and others visiting the zoo, the golf course, or attending just other park activities can still find a place to park. So just for those who may not be familiar with the app, here's how the system will work. Park visitors will use the Park Boston app to reserve parking. You'll enter a code provided with you know, the respective activity of choice. BTD's enforcement team will have access to the reservation database so that they can verify that the parking is legitimate and that, you know, vehicles parking with that code will not be issued a violation. That said, vehicles without a reservation will be subject to enforcement. Important to note here, that code will be free. This will not be fee-based parking. So, again, for those who may have, you know, you can get a look at this app now. You probably already have it if you park at meters within the city. So, communications and feedback. We want to highlight the communication strategy. Our approach before the first game of, you know, the new stadium, but then also what we'll repeat before the first game of each season. So, you know, we'll have on the city's website, we'll post the season schedule. We'll do that at least 3 months before the first game. There'll be information available at the office of the parking clerk well before the season begins. We'll do a postcard mailing, similar as that we do for other communications out of the office of the parking clerk. That will communicate to residents within the White Stadium Walkshed who qualify for parking. There'll be physical signage will be installed within the Walkshed at least 30 days before the first game. There'll be static kind of permanent signs that will be posted. These signs will be similar to the signs that folks may have seen around Boston College. And there may also be like temporary signs that may need to be deployed as well. So as far as community engagement, you know, we'll organize webinars, info sessions. There'll be text alerts to keep residents and visitors informed about game days. Parking restrictions, et cetera. We'll collaborate with the Office of MOIA to ensure all residents, regardless of immigration status, language, et cetera, understand the program and that they are protected. So again, on game days, residents will notice that there'll be temporary signage. On the right, you see this is a current version of the example of the static signage that I mentioned. There'll be VMS boards and enforcement signage out, and that those regulations will be enforced 6 hours prior to a game and 1 hour after the game. And again, you may see temporary no stopping signs if necessary that will be posted at least 48 hours before any event. That's standard practice throughout the city. There'll also be wayfinding signage around the park and abutting streets. Parking enforcement and ambassadors, Boston Unity Soccer will station traffic ambassadors to guide pedestrian traffic and ensure smooth flow around the stadium. And again, the BTD enforcement team will be out to enforce all posted regulations. With that, I will hand it back to Chief Moore.
Chief, you're on mute.
Sorry. Thank you, Commissioner. As mentioned, continuous opportunity for engagement has been a driving principle for this project. There will be opportunity for engagement with the White Stadium Neighborhood Advisory Council, as I mentioned earlier, comprised of district city councilors, neighborhood representatives, Boston Public Schools, and relevant city departments. The White Stadium Neighborhood Advisory Council will review the soccer's team annual stadium operation report and provide feedback and oversight on transportation and logistics. So it's an opportunity to have an accountability measure and a feedback loop for the community. Also, other opportunities for ongoing engagement and strategies that has been implemented is a 3-in-1 feedback loop. We know 3-in-1 is a vital tool to constituents in the city of Boston. With the capabilities to launch a dedicated 3-in-1 line or kind of label to gather feedback on White Stadium and assess kind of the data we see from there, whether that means, quality of life concerns or any key thematic concerns we see, being able to address that. And lastly, engaging with nearby Franklin Park and transportation initiatives, participating in community meetings for Franklin Park projects, also engaging with the transportation project in surrounding areas, whether that means the safety surge or the Blue Hill Ave Transportation Action Plan. The goal is to have a comprehensive, cohesive approach as we see intentional transportation efforts in other abutting or close or impacted areas. Okay, so now we wanted to give a real life kind of understanding of how the transportation plan and the enforcement plan ties into a constituent's daily life and what the experience could feel like. We want to highlight how this plan may apply to residents who live near the park or are impacted by the park in any way. So for example, we take Veronica, who is a park abutter and lives within the walk shed. Because she met the eligible criteria for obtaining a permit, Veronica applied and received a game day parking permit, which is on the bumper of her car. Veronica went out during the day and ran errands, and whether that includes, running to the store, going to the grocery store, and returned to her parking space at the end of the day without receiving any enforcement penalties, despite it being game day, because she did the proper thing and got her permit. So I wanted to give that example. Next, we have Josh. Josh lives outside the city, but his grandmother lives inside the city in Roxbury. And Josh is coming to visit his grandmother who lives within the Walkshed area. When Josh arrives at his grandmother's house, she gives him her visitor's placard, which he displays on his windshield in his car. They go out, enjoy lunch with his grandmother. And although there's a game going on, he is able to enjoy lunch and does not get ticketed or towed because he has the visitor placard. Next, we have Liz. So Liz lives outside the city and is planning on driving into the stadium to see a soccer game with her friends. Although she knows she's taking a chance due to the restricted parking, she is hoping to find a spot within the Franklin Park area. When she arrives at the park, she notices all the signage that tells her she is not allowed to park during game day, but she decides to take the risk anyways. When BTD is doing their normal enforcement around the area, they notice Liz's car is not registered within the parking app, a mobile app, and tickets and tows Liz's car. After the game, Liz returns to find her car being towed, and she has a hefty fine that the commissioner mentioned, and she will not try and hopefully learns her lesson and does not park there again. Next, we have Rachel. Rachel lives downtown and is planning a day trip to Franklin Park with her son. She saw online that there's a free shuttle from Ruggles Station that takes you to Franklin Park on game days. She gets on the Orange Line and takes a free shuttle to the park, where she enjoys a fun afternoon at the zoo and in the Grove with her son. After an eventful afternoon, she just takes the shuttle back to Ruggles and gets on the Orange Line home. Lastly, we have Jeff, who lives in Quincy, and he's taking his son and a couple of his friends to see a soccer game. When Jeff bought his tickets, he was notified that if you intend to drive, you should park at a satellite lot. On game day, Jeff drove to the lot off I-93 South and jumps on a shuttle that takes him up Columbus Ave using the center running bus lanes to get to the stadium. After the game, they jump right back on the shuttle and return to their car at the satellite lot where they drove home. These are just some experiences of realistic park users or maybe zoo users, butters, or people coming into town to utilize the space, and what those parking enforcement or traffic enforcement looks like. And with that, I believe I pass it over back to the commissioner.
Thank you, Chief. So we're going to talk a little bit about kind of the TAPA process in how this works. So what is a TAPA? It's a Transportation Access Plan, which is a legally binding agreement between BTD and developers, in this case lessee, for projects of over 50,000 square feet. We do this to ensure transportation impacts are managed for local community benefit. Each TAPA, including the one for White Stadium, is reviewed and approved by the city transportation staff and outlines how transportation access and operations will be managed. Specifically, there's commitments to improve bike, ped, and public transit infrastructure, upgrade traffic signals, encourage walking, biking, and transit use, and ensure compliance with city standards for construction. There's been nearly 700 TAPAs executed since the late 1980s, all of which are publicly available for review. So where are we in the White Stadium TAPA timeline? Again, the TAPA process is a long and iterative one. We started back in October of 2023. As you can see, we've consulted with numerous organizations, neighborhood associations. We've conducted a number of neighborhood-specific workshops, small transportation focus groups, and here we are with another transportation update meeting. So the next kind of key milestones in this process will be the execution of the lease between the city and Boston Unity Soccer. BTD and Boston Unity are currently working on draft versions of the TAPA as we speak, and we'll continue collecting that data and revising that document, including feedback that we receive tonight and from the subsequent comments. So the next step after that, once the lease is signed and between construction, obviously there'll be a finalization of the construction documents and then execution of the TAPA. And while we do our best to ensure that we get as much of the information that we need into the TAPA agreement, they can be amended if necessary. I just want to also kind of outline some of the key Boston Unity Soccer commitments in the TAPA. So first and foremost, on the traffic and parking side, there's a commitment to provide fully electric shuttles within 3 years of operations. There's also the significant commitment to provide free shuttles to Franklin Park from the transit facilities that Brian referenced earlier. Again, they'll be supporting the supplemental resources for BTD to do enforcement on game days. On the communications and feedback side, they'll be hiring staff to help manage game day transportation management operations. They're going to hire an executive director for operations as well as a transportation coordinator. And they'll also provide annual stadium operations report to the White Stadium Neighborhood Area Council for review. And finally, with formalizing commitments in the TAPA process, there'll be pathway lighting and safety improvements, again, new bike racks around the stadium, funding for a new blue bike station within the park, and joining the Transportation Management Association. With that, we're going to move into the discussion portion of the evening.
Thank you so much, Commissioner. I'm just going to jump in here. So as the Commissioner mentioned, we are at the Q&A/comment section. If you have a question, please raise your hand. A reminder that we will go to you and have the 2-minute timer. So each question in our comment is going to be 2 minutes. As we frame the discussion, just wanted a reminder of just top lines that we discussed today. So the traffic and parking for the soccer league and BPS events. We have some framing questions here on things that can get you thinking. What strategies can we implement to encourage transportation, stuff like that, sustainable transportation. Next topic is safety and enforcement. Is there any concerns there? How can we keep the community informed on and game day parking? We want to learn a lot about more there. And the last but not least, but communication and feedback. We want to make sure that we're collaborating on the White Stadium Neighborhood Advisory Council. If you have any feedback on that, would love to hear that. But these are the kind of 3 issue areas we want to stay focused on, transportation as a topic. And with that, the first hand I see is Louis Elisa. And I think the timer should come up at the corner. Yes, you should unmute yourself. Okay, there you go.
Good evening. Thank you for the presentation. Quick scenario. Talani Elisa, who lives in Washington, D.C., comes to visit her father on Seaver Street, right across from the park. Comes with her 2 friends to come visit who live outside of Boston, one from Connecticut and one from New Hampshire. They park on Seaver Street because they're visiting Talani, unaware that there's a game or whatever is going on because they're there to visit. Their car gets ticketed and towed. What is the appeal process for immediate resolution for issues of this nature? And who should we contact? And then how do we make this known to people who are not Boston residents that we have these very strict activities on game day?
That's a great question. I'm going to pass it to the Commissioner Gove. I think signage was one of the things that was mentioned earlier, just to have clear signage, but I want to pass it over to him to answer that question.
Sure. So for all the areas in the Walkshed where this White Stadium parking district area will be created, there'll be permanent static signs to communicate what those restrictions are. Again, that will be supplemented potentially with some no stopping signs as well. But in the event that someone does get a ticket or worst case scenario towed, obviously there's the standard appeal process through the office of the parking clerk where someone can appeal a ticket and go through that adjudication process.
Yeah, but I'm talking about people from out of town. The day that they're ticketed and towed, if they're here visiting me on Seaver Street, their car is taken, and the ticket is appealable, but your car is towed, and they live out of town. How does that process work?
I think the as the Commissioner mentioned, the traditional appeal process of any ticket will be the same process, but I think what we could think of as a solution is how do we have clear signage? So regardless of where you're coming, if you're parking in the area, it's clear that you're not supposed to be parking there unless you have certain permitting or permission in some way, shape, or form. But with that, we're gonna go to the next question from Fatima.
Hi, good evening. Thank you for your presentation. This question is for the Deputy Commissioner. I read recently there's an article about the on-demand micro transit shuttles. I don't know if you saw that piece in Street Blogs, and they had mentioned the Grove Hall, Mattapan area specifically as being the first mile, last mile pickup area. And I wanted to know if that was something that is being as part of this effort.
Gonna pass as
yeah no
yeah
great question. glad you saw the article. It's a relatively new program. We haven't discussed it specific to White Stadium with Boston Unity. You know, it's something we can certainly look at. I think discussions to this point have been kind of larger assets than that, but again, it's something that we're happy to discuss moving forward.
Thank you for that question. Next we have Peter.
Hi, thank you. Thanks very much for the presentation and all the details. I appreciate the ongoing communication that everyone has. 3 really quick questions. Will people really be towed? I think there was some ambiguity in the 2 speakers if they're there or they just get the ticket. How many BPD officers would be there on game day? Because I imagine that's a lot of area to cover. I imagine a lot of people would be able to park there and not have anybody go by their car. And then I think I heard that Walnut Ave is being used again for shuttles. I thought that was off the table. Thank you.
Thank you. I believe that's BTD. So Commissioner, part of that question.
Yeah, I can. So yeah, first and foremost, just from a kind of resource deployment standpoint, looking at, you know, up between 10 and 20 officers and supervisors for an event. Our approach to enforcement for this type of an event is, you know, we get out early. We make ourselves known and our presence known so that we kind of, if we have the opportunity to communicate to people and give them a chance to either not park or move, we then move into issuing violations. And, unfortunately, the last step is towing if those measures don't work. So that's the order in which we approach enforcement for events across the city today. What we find is, when you start writing violations, people see that, they'll come out, they'll move their vehicles, and same thing with towing. Once you start towing a few vehicles, that has a pretty strong impact on enforcement.
Thank you for that answer, Commissioner. Nancy?
Chief Millard, do you mind if we just pass to Brian to speak to the Walnut Ave shuttle route first?
Oh, yes, please, yes. I missed that part of the question.
Yeah, hey, so as part of negotiations with the butters nearby the public, we went from potentially 57 buses on Walnut Ave, and it was agreed to limit that to 40 before and after on Walnut Ave. The other change that happened was that we were going to enter the existing driveway across from Park Lane and then exit up by School Street and El Parquecito, and that is no longer the case. We are now entering and exiting from the existing driveway across from Park Lane.
Thank you for that answer, Brian. Sorry to miss that part of the question. Nancy, I see is the next abutter.
Thank you. I have 4 quick issues. The first is the electric vehicles will be 3 years. Within 3 years, is that from today or when this whole project starts? Because none of our neighborhoods need more diesel exhaust. It's linked to heart and lung disease, cancer, dementia. So that should really be no diesel vehicles from day one. Second, where are the basketball and tennis courts going that are now currently there by the stadium? Third is who will select the neighborhood representatives on the White Stadium Neighborhood Advisory Council? And fourth, what about UPS, Amazon, and other delivery vehicles during the game days?
Okay, so for the first half of that question, I believe that was the soccer league could answer that. And then the second half on the road usage, like the road usage still exists. It's just parking enforcement and being mindful of street usage. But I wanted to pass it over to Sauk Lake to answer. Brian?
Sorry, I was muted. Can we just do one question at a time so that everyone can follow?
Oh, yeah.
So-
Sorry, Nancy, can you repeat your first question and one at a time?
The first question was the issue of diesel exhaust versus
Yes.
electric. And
So we will
start
switch.
from day one.
We are trying to, we have to make sure that those buses are readily available by 2026. But the intent is to switch, because we agree with everything you said, to have electric running as soon as it's viable.
And then your second question,
One is
Nancy?
what's happening to the basketball court and the tennis courts that are now there by the stadium?
So the city question. As mentioned earlier, there will be a new tennis and basketball court.
By the stadium? In the place?
Fran, I'm happy to, I think
Yeah, go
Avery and I can speak to this. Avery, do you want to talk about, first of all, the basketball courts will be renovated, but then the decision to expand the tennis courts and why that was?
Yep. Yeah, in the plan, and that was based on feedback from these community meetings. The basketball courts will be renovated and remain as a activity that's available on the outside of the stadium. The tennis courts, we're exploring, or I think as part of the plan, are moving to the Shattuck area. For us to hold competitive tennis matches, we need to have a specific number of courts within the same area. Moving into the Shattuck will allow us to create another area in the city where there are multiple tennis courts for us to be able to host and practice tennis during the season.
The neighbors that use that who are not competitive tennis players, but I'll move on to my third question, which is who will select the neighborhood representatives serving on the White Stadium Neighborhood Advisory Council?
So that is a great question, and that's one of the feedback loops we wanted to hear from you all tonight. We, as mentioned, there's certain stipulations on like wanting a city council representation, but we would love to hear from you. How would you like, do you have input on seeing how that this neighborhood representatives are selected?
Yeah, and I'll quickly add that that's a critical component of the composition of the neighborhood council. Is reflective of the entire city, but also the neighborhoods directly and the folks directly impacted by it. We're also going to be pulling for some of the best practices that we've seen across the city in other neighborhoods for other events, and the representation of those community members to make sure that we're, again, amplifying community voice.
The fourth question was, what about UPS and Stop and Shop Peapod and Amazon and other delivery vehicles during the time that the games are happening and such?
Yeah, I think the answer to that is like, the road still exists and it has usage, but they need to be mindful of obviously idling and parking as well.
And Chief Mueller, I can add to that. There's going to be a designated loading dock as part of the new stadium. This loading dock will serve, as you mentioned, for many of those delivery services. And you can see the design of the stadium in depth on one of our previous presentations that's on the website. And I will drop that link in the chat below.
Okay, thank you, Nancy. What we've learned from Nancy's question is one question at a time, please, and we'll do the timer. So Frederick is the next question. And you have to unmute yourself, Frederick.
Okay, I'd like to thank you for dealing with all the complexity that you've gone over. There were a lot of things that I didn't expect to hear about, and it was very refreshing seeing the the actual getting around home day, showing different examples, such as Elise mentioned, where a particular person is in a difficult situation and how it will be handled. I like that there's traffic ambassadors. It's going to help. I think that one of the main things I see working very well are the shuttles, because you've really simplified it, put it in different points of the city. And this summer I discovered in Ipswich, at the train stop in Ipswich, there was a shuttle that went to Cranes Beach. And I don't know if you're aware, but if you ever try to go to Cranes Beach, first you have to get a pass and it costs $25, $30. But if you go to the shuttle, that's it. That's it. It's $5. And the shuttle, that includes your access to the beach. And with this plan, you have a free shuttle to Franklin Park, not only for the soccer players, but for other people as well, which I think is also terrific. And the other thing I'd like to address is that as the city grows, and one of the benefits of this stadium is it's providing more for the people as the city grows, for all the people. And so I see this, for instance, with Boston Traffic Department putting cameras on Forest Hill Street, at Glen Road, and then at Washington Street, as part of the growth. As we grow and need to better observe the complexity of what happens, I think it's going to just help. And the same way that the parking passes will help. As the city grows, we also will have to function.
You're over time. Thank you. But thank you for your comments and your feedback. I really appreciate the perspective. Next, we have Marty.
Yes, thank you. I would like to ask about Columbia Road. I'm speaking on behalf of the Hancock Street Civic Association and on behalf of all of the residents and service providers and businesses, employees, customers, patients, and others that use Columbia Road. As Commissioner Gove knows, we're in the middle of the Columbia Road Transportation Action Plan, and there has been overwhelming feedback, unanimous feedback, that we do not want bus lanes on Columbia Road. And we've been assured that for the normal MBTA bus traffic, they aren't needed and the city isn't considering them. Would you please explain how you intend to get what I remember from your slide as 104 shuttle trips, 22 from T-stops, and I presume 84 from your remote parking areas into Franklin Park on the South Loop without installing bus lanes?
Yes, so we have, I want to get the exact number for you. Hold on one second.
I may not be remembering the exact number from your slide.
Right, so there's 104 trips coming in on what we call the South Loop, right? Those are the buses that will be using the Valley Gates parking lot, which is the dirt lot off of Circuit Drive. That's an existing dirt lot that is typically gated off. So that's the South Loop. There'll be 104 shuttle trips there. They actually come from 3 different areas. They'll be coming from Forest Hills, so coming in from the Arbor Way south of Franklin Park. They'll be coming up Blue Hill Avenue, and then going on to Circuit Drive, and then they will also be coming down Columbia Road. To say really the majority of the 22 that we said out of the 104, 22 would be coming from JFK UMass. They will be on Columbia Road. There's, that's who would be on Columbia Road. There could also be a few satellite parking shuttles on there, but the 22 we know for sure. It's not 104. And again, these numbers, which not again, because I didn't say it before, I apologize. These numbers are over a 2-hour period before the game and almost a 2-hour period after the game. So
are you
if you're talking about 25 shuttle trips, you're talking about one shuttle about every 4 minutes on Columbia Road.
Are you comfortable that you can do that without installing restricted bus lanes?
I can tell you that BUSP is not installing restricted bus lanes anywhere in the city, yes.
Marty, we actually have to go to the next person because your time has completed. So I hope I'm pronouncing this name right. The next person is Janine. Thank you, Brian, for that answer.
Hi, yes, I'm Janine, and I'm also with Franklin Park Tennis Association. And I'm just trying to understand what it looks like on game day for park users that may normally come and park on, say, Circuit Drive and work the loop. You know, what does that look like? Are they able to come? Is that where they use the parking app? They come in and they use the parking app, park on Circuit Drive, or is there no parking on Circuit Drive?
Commissioner, I think Commissioner Gove, that's a question for you.
So depending upon the time of the game, there will be parking restrictions within the park. But it's gonna vary by game day.
Right.
And if I could just, I'm sorry.
So,
Go
so
ahead.
in terms of how will the community know, you know, say we have regularly scheduled activities and things like that. I know there's like a yoga group that meets and things like that. How will we know what the schedule is? Are games mostly, I'm assuming most games are on Saturday, is my understanding. Is that correct?
I'm happy to answer. Oh, go ahead, Commissioner. Sorry.
No, I you might be saying the same thing, but for permanent park users, for permanent events like that, you know, there'll be an opportunity to work with parks to gain access to the same type of code that we referenced earlier for the Park Boston app.
And how do we keep game users from not reserving those spots?
So again, the parking enforcement, anyone who has a code in the app, right?
Yeah.
The parking enforcement officers have access to that database in real time, so they'll know whether a vehicle is authorized to park or not.
Okay, Janine, thank you for your questions. We have to go to the next hand up. I think it's Pete, I see.
Hi, thanks. A couple of things. Concerned about having just one ride share drop off and potential traffic jams there after games. Would like to see the traffic monitoring technology at Cemetery and Morton Street, because that's already a horrible. It seems like traffic gets backed up there. Wondering about just closing down Walnut Street and how feasible that is, just to make sure that people aren't wandering up there and creating a traffic jam that impacts the flow of the buses. And then just some clarification from Nick. So it's incumbent upon every resident in the walk shed to take steps to get a parking sticker and a resident and a visitor pass, which sounds like different language from before.
I apologize if it sounds like different language, but no, we've been trying to communicate the same thing here. So the sticker will be free, and you'll be able to access it online, similar to how folks get an RPP permit. But we're only gonna give it to someone if they need it, right? I mean, people who have off-street parking may not want the sticker, so obviously they're not going to apply for one. And same thing for the resident, for the visitor hang tag, right? If we're going to give it to anyone who wants it, but if somebody doesn't want it, again, if they have off-street parking, then we're not just going to send it out.
But you know, to the point made earlier, people
Sorry.
have to take steps in order to get it to avoid.
We have to go to the next person because there's 15 people in line. So Eric, thank you for your question though. Eric.
Yeah, hi, thank you. Dovetailing on one of Pete's questions about Walnut Street. Since you have the shuttles going down Walnut Street and making their U-turn basically in front of Park Lane, I'm thinking about trying to understand what the reality would be going up Glen Road, going down Sigourney, going down across Walnut, all of that traffic. So how do you imagine managing that traffic? And for example, there might be people who are dropping off their kids to watch a soccer game. They might drive all the way up Glen Road and go down Sigourney and just go for a drop off. Or there might be people looking for parking and they won't find parking and they'll have to turn around and go to a satellite parking place. So what do you think about, what does it look like managing the traffic jam that will happen going up Glen Road, Sigourney, and Walnut?
Hi, Eric. Well, so we have already agreed to close Walnut Avenue. So I'm not trying to remove all your points because people would still be doing it somewhere else, but it wouldn't be at Sigourney and Glen Road. There would be no way to exit out to Seaver Street or come in from Seaver Street. And then as for people dropping off, we're going to have the variable message signs throughout the area directing people to the ride hailing lot on Seaver Street for that activity. Now, obviously, we can sign it as much as we want. People are going to pull over and drop people off quickly, but we are going to do everything we can to direct them to where we want them to be so that they're not going through the residential neighborhood.
Thank you, Brian. Christina.
Hi there. Thank you guys for your work on this. I'm curious that people in Boston use Franklin Park not just for the zoo and golf, but also for kind of family events. So I'm hoping that the Park Boston code could allow people to come in the park for, like, people have also mentioned like birding or, you know, walking and that sort of thing. So I'm hoping, and also not everyone can use QR codes. These are kind of like similar points, like not everyone uses a QR code. So I'm hoping there could be an option for, like, for instance, elderly people or people who aren't able to use QR codes. I have another question, but I'll start with that one.
So maybe we can just explain the park mobile system one more time, and how the city is still looking to take some steps to ensure that there are areas for regular park goers and event permit holders on game days. So how the park mobile system works is that upon purchasing of your zoo ticket or golf tee time, or upon having an event permit, you would be issued an access code, and that access code would either go within the app, but there's also a website portion if somebody is not familiar with how to use the app technology, and that access code would reserve your parking and it would be free. So that's how we're trying to preserve parking for those different park users as well as stakeholder groups. But there is the app version, but also a website version as well. And Commissioner Gove, is there anything you'd like to add there?
I think you got it. Thanks, Luke.
And Christina.
Yeah, I think my comment was basically just to say that people go into the park not just for things like golf and zoo. So I'm worried that people who want to use the park for other non-paid activities won't be able to get an access code. So I'm wondering if you can create additional categories for things that are not just zoo and not just the zoo and golfing.
That's super helpful, and we'll start to we'll meet with all the park operators and permit holders and regular park goers to anticipate some of the challenges that you mentioned. We want to make it challenging for game goers to get these codes ahead of time, and also to think about what all the different activities are, right? We say the zoo and golf course because these are magnet destinations, but we'll continue to figure out, okay, what are the activities and how do we protect those when there are games? So we'll continue to meet with that and with the app to figure out how do we really firm up that approach.
And Christina, you had a second question?
Let's see. Yeah, it was around shuttles going up Circuit Drive for people who are trying to bike or walk just for leisure in the park on game days.
Nick, did you want to?
Yeah, I mean, there won't be any bike or ped restrictions there. So that shouldn't be impacted.
Thank you for your question. Chris is the next hand I see up.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much for that presentation. Chris Vaughn, I live on Iffley Road, in a butter of the stadium. I think this is a very well thought out and detailed plan. So thank you so much for presenting it. Just wanted to confirm, the white stadium sticker, that will only apply on the game days. So parking is still free for anyone outside of game days, in the Watershed area?
That is correct. Yeah,
Okay.
that regulation will only be in effect on game days.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Kevin?
Yes, thank you. I really appreciate this opportunity to have this back and forth. I think the city is being generous with its time, and we appreciate it. I have questions, though, about the Walnut Ave shuttle traffic. I believe we did receive a commitment that there was going to be a rehearsal of shuttles sometime before we really put this plan in place to open up Walnut and to see what the impacts of the size of shuttles going back and forth would be, for example, on pedestrians, on parking there along Walnut, etc. So I'm wondering if that's been planned yet, and when we might expect to see a demonstration of the viability of shuttles coming in and out of Walnut.
So we are still standing by that commitment, but we have not yet scheduled it. But we will reach out once we have.
Thank you, Commissioner. I'm actually going to call on Councilor Ben Weber. I was supposed to call on him before the Q&A started to say a few words. Next unmute.
No. Hello, can you hear me? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I just briefly, you know, I see a lot of familiar names and faces, and you know, in terms of the transportation, I think you know, this has been a part of an ongoing process, and I'll certainly, as the District 6 counselor, you know, be working with people in the community and continue to work with folks from the city to make sure that, you know, we get the best plan in place possible. But in terms of the neighborhood council, my initial thought, and I'd love to hear feedback from people, was that we would just have, you know, I would like to be a part of it, but also just designees from the abutting neighborhood associations. We could designate those, like, you know, Parkside, Stony Brook Neighborhood Association, Eggleston Square Neighborhood Association, the JP Neighborhood Council. You know, I would rather they designated people to be on the council than for me to, you know, handpick people. But you know, I think that is going to be worked out. That was just my initial thought on how to approach that. So thank you, Brianna. I'll see the rest of my time. I know there's lots of questions, and I'll be listening. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilor, and thank you for your feedback on the White Stadium Neighborhood Advisory Council. And we will make sure to take that into account as built out and make sure to hear from, like you mentioned, neighbors on that. But that's really a great idea to get them involved on neighborhood associations. The next question I see is from Melissa, or hand I see.
Yeah, hi, my name's Melissa Hamill. I live on Lamartine Street. I have a number of questions. I'm going to start with the guest pass. You mentioned that each person in the Watershed area would be given a guest pass to use on a Saturday during the game. Now, often people have barbecues or cookouts and parties on Saturdays. If someone is going to have more than one guest come to their house on a Saturday night during the summer months, which is highly likely, how will that be accommodated? My next question is about
Wait,
businesses.
sorry, let's just break up the question. So we'll pause your time and give you an answer. Multiple guest passed, visitors passed. Nick.
Sure. So again, yeah, there'll only be the one visitor pass per household. That said, for larger neighborhood events, people will have the opportunity to do a block party, a Play Street permit. So that opportunity will remain for those types of events.
Okay, I'm sorry, but I live on La Martine Street. Are you saying that I will be able to block off all of La Martine Street in order to have a barbecue?
No, I'm not saying that.
Okay, all right, so that's really not a very useful thing to say to people because there's a lot of people who live on busy streets like Green Street, La Martine, other streets that obviously you can't do a block party permit. Okay, so my next question is businesses. There's a lot of businesses along Washington Street, Eggleston Square, and I actually have a business myself. I rent out rooms for Airbnb, and often I have guests that have cars. So again, I'm only allowed one guest permit, so that will prevent me from having my business run profitably. That's just a comment, because obviously you're not accommodating us. The other thing is, how do you ensure pedestrian safety with all these shuttle buses? We just recently lost one of our beloved members of our community over at Forest Hill Station due to improper planning and at that location with pedestrian signage and this is a concern with all these shuttles coming in. And finally, there's a lot of comments in the comment section about the parking pass and how you're going to be able to ensure people who are coming into the park for, say, a barbecue.
So Melissa, your time is up and we want to give space to react to some of your questions and concerns specifically about the businesses and then the visitors pass.
Just peed.
So I can start and hand it over to Anchi if that's helpful. But Melissa, we're working with small businesses that are within the Walkshed. We're having small business walkthroughs as well as small business briefings to ensure that the proper signage is deployed within the Walkshed zone to make sure that none of the small businesses have an impact for any of the restrictions. Similarly, I think we'd be open to working with any small business. So if your small business you think is going to be impacted, feel free to reach out to us and we can work with you on creating a solution to ensure that your small business is also accommodated within the Walkshed zone.
Thank you.
And for the pedestrian safety, there was a slide that shows all of the locations where the Boston Police Department and others plan on having traffic details. This will mainly, some of it will be to make sure the shuttles are operating well. There'll be one, say, at the ride hailing area over on Seaver Street to make sure that that's operating efficiently. But many of them are for pedestrian safety to get them across the street. And not just the shuttles, but all vehicles in the area. Obviously, we're bringing a lot of pedestrians into the area. So with or without the shuttles, we need to make sure that we're providing pedestrian safety through the area.
And I'd also just like to highlight on the safety improvements being done within the park. So I know another question was about pedestrian and bike safety on Circuit Drive. The Parks Department is undergoing a Circuit Drive safety improvement plan to improve pedestrian mobility around and in the park as well. So that's other safety improvements that the city is deploying in this area.
Okay, so next we see Ricardo.
Good evening. Can you hear me? Perfect. Hi, everyone. How you doing? I'm Ricardo Lewis. I'm the owner of Privé Parking. We are a Roxbury-based parking solution transportation management company. We were also the local minority-owned business that was awarded the transportation contract for the NAACP National Convention that took place last year at the Convention Center. And we are also 2024 Small Business of the Year by the Boston Chamber of Commerce. One of the things I want to point out is it has been very difficult and challenging to meet with the group on understanding contract opportunities. I know you guys have initiatives to really work with local businesses. And here, my business, the issue that we're talking about today is parking and transportation. Now, we provide traffic control services, We also do parking lot management services, and we also provide shuttle services as well. And I would like to know who is the right individual, the right group to get in front of to talk about these opportunities, because what we see tend to happen when it comes to large developments is that they make these commitments. And if we're not at the table at the very beginning of these developments, we tend to get lost because they forget about us, and they already have their relationships and partnerships with their vendors that they used to work in. And once again, a development happens in our community and we miss those opportunities. So this is something that I want to identify right now, and also understand, who's the right group to talk about when it comes to winning and getting these contracts.
Thank you for that question. Pass it over to Mike.
Yeah, hi, Ricardo. Mike Omenazi here, Director of Community Engagement. That's a major area of focus for me, not just personally because I'm in the area and obviously hoping for the benefits to ensure the businesses reach and access them, but that's obviously a commitment that we made, particularly around minority and women businesses, as well as businesses that are directly in and from the community. We are working to right now collect exhaustively, identify all the different potential opportunities where we can engage businesses and entrepreneurs like yourself in this project, and are working with the city in that partnership to make sure we can properly communicate that to business owners and entrepreneurs like yourself. So to answer your question, I'm the right person to be able to talk to you. And again, this is reflective of the intentional investment that the team has made in order to address these specific and make sure we fulfill our commitments in these areas.
Michael, I'm sorry. Nice to meet you, Michael. Well, Michael, if it's possible, I would like, to connect with you directly to talk about these opportunities. Because like I said, this is one of the biggest concerns that we have here in the community, because we always miss these opportunities. And I guess my last question, I'll be brief, is have you guys already identified a transportation company or parking company to deal with the management of this?
Brian, maybe you're best suited to answer the transportation piece.
Yeah, so I was waiting for Michael to chime in, but as far as I know, BUSP, I'm Brian with Howard Sun Hudson. We are a consulting firm. We are not a bus manager, like you're saying. As far as I am aware, BUSP is not contracted out with any bus operator at this time. And not sure the best way to get you in touch with Michael, but he is certainly the person to start with.
Ricardo, I'll make sure to follow up with you directly and share my contact information. Thanks.
Thank you, Ricardo, for that question. Leslie?
Thank you. Can you hear me? Yes, right?
Yes.
Okay, I also appreciate these community meetings and taking the time. I am an abutter to the park. I have been an abutter for 40 years, and not only an abutter, but an advocate for protecting our park. And this transportation question has been an issue for the entire 40 years that I've lived here. I want to focus my question on Pierpont Road, the non-road paved area that circles around the stadium. I want to get clarity about the shuttles. Are they going to be pulling into the driveway at Park Lane and then going around Pierpont Road and dropping people off at the front door to the stadium and turning around and exiting through the parking lot? Or is that no longer the case? I have the same question for BPS, who gave a very brief presentation, and it looked to me like they thought Pierpont Road was their throughway for every 15 hours a day activity that they've got. And now I hear about the new loading dock for delivery vehicles and for VIPs. How many more vehicles are going to be coming into our park and using it as a throughway, drop-off point, parking place, etc., for the loading dock? So shuttles, BPS, and loading dock, and how is that going to impact the use of Pierpont Road and the safety and accessibility for regular park use if Pierpont Road is now a throughway for all those vehicles? Thanks.
All right, so I can take the first and third. First of all, loading dock does not equal VIP parking. A loading dock is a loading dock. It would not be operational during the game time events, right? We need a way to service the stadium, whether it's for BPS events or BUSP events. But we would not be having an active loading dock while we were bringing in 11,000 spectators. So it's not, it won't be additional volume on top of the shuttles that we're talking about. There will be no throughway in Franklin Park. It's not in this presentation, but our original plan, as I've discussed, was to come in off of Walnut Avenue for the North Loop across from Park Lane and then exit by by School Street or the Parkcito. And we had heard from the public that they did not want additional vehicles or Pierpont Road, additional pathways within Franklin Park to be open to vehicles, even if they were for buses and shuttles only. So we are now entering and exiting from the existing driveway that is across from Park Lane, and doing that all within the site. So there, I think that's the three, right? The other two, the loading dock is not operational at the same time and not meant for spectator parking. And the shuttles are not traveling through Franklin Park. It's a loop within Franklin Park on the north side of the stadium. And you're able to get one of our previous presentations, you can see the path they take. And then the second one
Was about BPS usage of a road, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is part of the project. The slides that I presented are really us taking a look at our use of the stadium, what the needs are in terms of spectators. Obviously, I think as we've talked through all this, the Franklin Park Action Plan and a lot of the pieces and outcomes that we're looking to achieve through that have been in the forefront. So there still is work to be done. I mean, I think as we highlighted there, as we can characterize the events that we're planning on having there, we'll have a better idea of how we approach the parking situation and how we prepare and plan for it. But there is everyday usage. Part of this project and renovating of the stadium is to create better efficiency in some of the needs that we have for our students and for our coaches. And there are deliveries that happen there. Our equipment for all of the stadium, for all of the city are all coming to a centralized place. So there's since we've been there, there's always has been deliveries that have come, and it's really been in a really inefficient manner. So we'll be looking to make that more efficient, not only for the deliveries, but I think also for the people that come to pick up their equipment.
Thank you for that, Coach Avery. We're going to move on now to Leslie.
Yeah, I think you got back to me, but I appreciate you doing so. I
okay,
just want to clarify that the north side of the stadium is Pierpont Road, Brian. And it sounds like you are going to be using Pierpont Road to turn buses around. You're not just going to turn them around in the parking lot. You're going to use the road that goes in front of the park, in front of the stadium, to turn your buses around. I can't tell you, all of you, how bad it is for our park and for our community to have these vehicles using that pathway for motorized vehicles. It's dangerous, it's bad for the park, and it's bad for the community. This is an unintended bad outcome.
Leslie, thank you for that. We are going to have to move on as we have about 8 or more so questions over the next 20 minutes. So we want to be respectful of folks' time and stay at 8. Thank you. And now the Garrison Trotter Neighborhood Association.
Hello, was that for Garrison Trotter and Mark?
Yes, I believe so.
Okay. Good evening to everyone. Excuse me. So it's quite amazing how much safety is going to be put in for this soccer franchise in around White Stadium. I am Garrison Trotter Neighborhood Association Safety Chairperson. And the fact that everyday infractions happen around this neighborhood, I'm personally 6 blocks from White Stadium. And so we see these infractions every day and nothing is done. Now, because you're going to put a soccer up, they're going to put it in only for that day. So what about the rest of the days? Also, someone mentioned something about Glen Road and Washington Street and cameras going in. We have 6 schools in this neighborhood. We would like to have some cameras over here too. That would also help you on Saturday game day. But also the fact that you don't have the box implementation on the ground to say, don't go into this intersection when your light's not for you, makes things so much more compound by not being able to get off of a street such as Crawford Street, such as other streets in this area that don't have those markings on the grounds. You have people coming in from out of town that do not follow rules and regulations and will drive through these intersections, drive through these red lights, these green lights, these yellow lights, and make traffic unbearable. I would like to ask somebody on this team from White Stadium that why isn't more infrastructure being put in to help areas such as Boston Globe mentioned, worst intersections in Boston on Wednesday's newspaper, Molina Cass Boulevard, Roxbury's area of Columbia Road. These are the worst intersections in this area that you're about to put this White Stadium in, and you're not doing anything to help us before then. I see my time is running out. Thank you for letting me get on my soapbox. But you guys are not working with the communities at all.
Thank you for that, Mark. And Alex, you respond as Mark and I are neighbors in both in the Garrison Trotter Neighborhood Association. And hear you, Mark. That's personally motivated part of my connection to this project, wanting to advocate for the community and to get the resources that neighbors like you for so long have asked for. And this really presents the opportunity to do that. We know and recognize that this is a trial for other large event days. And, we're trying to, we both share your passion for addressing a lot of those issues that have been chronic challenges. We're going to move on to Stacy.
Great. Thank you so much. I'm Stacy. I live in the neighborhood about 5 minutes away from Franklin Park and specifically White Stadium. I also am a frequent park user, and I think I have the unique experience of having been a student at a school that had a partnership with a professional sports team. So I have that unique experience of the challenges and opportunities of this. So I appreciate the discussion tonight. And I have one comment and I have one question, just an observation. I've been part of a lot of these conversations. I really appreciate, I can see the work that has gone into listening to the community, coming back, providing feedback. Like, this has been a good process. I feel good about the information that is presented so far. I would also say I have a lot of neighbors that don't have the time to show up to meetings, and there's just been a boatload of misinformation in my neighborhood. I've received flyers that have misinformation. I have heard from people that are presenting opinion as fact. And I would just like to encourage the city to put more flyers out or more information for folks who might not have the time to show up to meetings, so that they know where to go to get the information directly from the city and make their own decisions. And then on the question front, I'm curious if you've considered going beyond game day resident parking to converting some or all of the streets in the catchment area to full residential parking. I think some of what we discussed here tonight could be solved by making some streets permanently residential, and would be happy to be part of those conversations as a homeowner on a street that is impacted by this.
Thanks, Stacey. I can answer the RPP question. One of the reasons we designed the White Stadium Walkshed sticker program the way we did is to allow for future RPP expansion, but not require it in neighborhoods that may not want it. So we tried to be thoughtful in that, so that, once we restart the RPP program, which has been on pause, if there are neighborhoods within the Walkshed area that want to be part of the RPP program, we can do so, but still protect parking in neighborhoods that do not.
And I'll also add or address the first part of what you mentioned, Stacy, around the critical importance of ensuring community members have access to the right information. Totally agree. And we at the city, we in partnership with the city are working to think about how we can diversify outreach to community members, as tonight is reflective of that, and thinking so in a number of different ways. Also, we're available to meet with small groups and have worked with different neighbors, just like you, who have heard different things, but want to make sure everyone's on the right page or on the same page and has the right information. So we are more than available, and we'll share our contact information if folks want to coordinate and schedule more time with community members and neighbors as well. And we're going to move on to June.
Great. Thank you for this opportunity to speak. I think it's really important to have more transportation meetings like this, just because I think this is a very sensitive area, as you can tell. But I just had two quick, very questions. I live right on the corner of Montebello Road and Washington Street, just a block down from White Stadium. And so one thing I was wondering will any bollards be removed from Franklin Park entrances? Because I know at the North Walnut entrance right now in 2017, there was a pathway project to close that off. So I'm wondering if that is still a proposed shuttle exit and to undone that project pathway. And then my second question is the one permit per vehicle registered to address. I'm actually a renter, and there's many renters here as well who obviously might not have a car, who might have a car and a bike, both, who knows. But again, how does that work for a lot of renters who live in the Watershed area? Do they have to move their car when these games happen? How would that be addressed? And then just forgot, third question is the trees. Again, there's trees to be anticipated for removal. I don't know how 500 trees will be replacing the 55 mature trees that are anticipated to remove. So thank you.
I'm happy to take the first question because I know we've got a lot of questions on this. So we pulled up a diagram to show the Walnut Ave shuttle route turnaround. So Brian, maybe you can speak to this once I pull it up on the screen.
Yes, please. I could not find it, so I appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay, there you go, Brian.
But yeah, so right now so on the left here, Walnut Avenue, coming in and down, there is the existing driveway or Pierpont Road that leads to a parking lot. That will all be redesigned. The parking lot area, I'm saying, would be redesigned. But as you come up, the buses would make the left turn that you can see in the light blue line. This is where we would do the pickup and drop off of all the spectators. That's shown in the yellow along the area. And then right now, there's a big triangular median at this point, which we are going to modify and make it a circle, so that the buses can circle around and exit back out the same way that they came in. So there will be, I would say, a slightly extended area where shuttles only. This is not open to private vehicles. This is not open to VIPs. This is for the 40 maximum shuttles over 2 hours would be in here, and they'd be coming and going. But yes, it is a little bit more of an area that would be open to shuttle buses. That is not open to vehicles currently. But this is not a thoroughfare. This is not a throughway. And again, it will be monitored by traffic details that will only be allowing the shuttles to enter in from Walnut Avenue there.
Thank you, Brian. And I'd also just like to
Yeah,
highlight.
well, the thick gray lines are the pedestrian desire lines that we expect, right? Especially up on the top, that's how people would walk back and forth to the orange line for those that aren't taking shuttles. And we could see that we would separate the shuttle area around that circle and while still maintaining a very wide area for pedestrians to be on the side of it.
Wonderful. For ensure we can do our best to get the remaining comments, we're going to move on to Mitchell.
There we go. All right, so let's see, I had a bunch of questions here. Really surprised that Walnut Avenue was not really heavily covered during the formal presentation, since that's among the most controversial parts of the transportation aspects of this. But so Brian, I did hear you say that we're going to be closing Walnut. Are you also planning to close Sigourney and Glen Road? And I have a couple of questions after that.
Yep. So we didn't highlight a lot on Walnut because a lot of this has been discussed and determined and there weren't updates. So for those that are new, it's just to keep everyone on the same page. Yes, we are limiting the shuttles to 40, right? That was the first negotiation that we had. And then also closing Walnut at Seaver Street. And then the southern end, so whether it's Sigourney, that exact location hasn't been determined, right? We want to make sure we're protecting the area, but also not unduly influencing too many residents for reasons. So we're still working on the best place for the reciprocal closing on the southern end.
So when you
This
say
will all be-
closing Walnut and possibly closing Sigourney, and then not wanting to impact residents, are you saying residents can't traverse Walnut, or if you do chose to close Sigourney, they're not going to be able to move their own cars through there?
Oh, they will be. They will just have to go through a traffic detail to be able to get into the area. So they're impacted just because they would have to, have the interaction and get access to the area. They wouldn't be able
And
to.
that interaction is actually like rolling down your window and talking.
That's it. Hard for some people, but that is all.
All right, I'm not saying that's a good thing, but okay. And Avery, you made references to a formal plan over and over and over again, and you gave a lot of like overview, but that formal plan doesn't exist yet, does it?
No, I mean, I think we have concepts. Again, like I said before, we're really evaluating the nature of the events that we host.
Yeah, everyone's making fun